no doubt about it. You're doing it again right now. That thing is making your life terrible. It's too much for you, and now the terrible truth that I didn't understand for years. Every big step forward in your life, every genuine moment of happiness, every real link, and every creative triumph took place when you stopped trying to make them happen. You got the promotion after you stopped being so obsessed. It was when you stopped looking that love found you. That answer showed up as soon as you stopped pushing for it. This advice won't make you feel good. This is a warning about a flaw in the human mind that is so deep that a Russian author saw it coming more than 150 years ago and predicted our current epidemic of anxiety, stress, and self-harm. We're just now starting to understand what Fyodor Dostoevsky saw. Consciousness itself might be a sickness, and the cure we're all looking for is making us sicker. You may have seen this strange thing happen in your own life. The more you try to reach a goal, the harder it is to get there. The more you try to be happy, the more it slips away from you. The more you try to make someone think you're impressive, the less impressive you seem. This paradoxical truth is the basis for Fyodor Dostoevsky's philosophical ideas about people and the paradox of effort. Dostoevsky noted this trend in both his novels and his own life. He was born in Moscow in 1821, during a time when Russia was going through a lot of social and philosophical change. His own life was full of the same kinds of contradictions that he would later write about. The more he tried to use willpower and smart planning to stop his gambling addiction, the more money he lost. The more he tried to make the perfect novel by carefully planning it out, the less creative he became. He only made great works like Crime and Punishment when he gave in to the chaotic flow of inspiration. This paradox works on many levels of human experience. Think about how easy it is to fall asleep. The more you focus on sleeping, paying attention to your breathing, looking at the clock, and figuring out how many hours are left until morning, the more awake you become. The work you do makes things worse. The same idea holds true for creativity. Writers who sit down with the goal of writing a great book often end up with blank pages, but writers who write without pressure often find surprising brilliance. The phenomenon transcends individual psychology, influencing social dynamics. When you try too hard to get people to like you, you seem needy or fake. People can tell you're trying too hard and back off. When you really want to find romantic love, potential partners can tell and lose interest. Your strong desire sends out energy that pushes away what you want. Dostoevsky knew that people have an almost supernatural ability to tell when someone is trying too hard, and they naturally resist. This paradox shows up in interesting ways in the world of economics. Many entrepreneurs fail when they only care about making money. On the other hand, those who focus on solving problems or following their passions often end up making money as a side effect. If you only care about getting rich, you'll miss out on real chances. You get so focused on the end result that you miss the natural paths that will get you there. Dostoevsky's insight transcended superficial observation. He understood that this paradox elucidates a fundamental aspect of human consciousness and free will. Animals act on instinct, and machines follow programming, but people have a special kind of self-awareness that can get in the way of natural processes. Your mind makes a feedback loop. You see yourself trying, think the effort isn't enough, try harder, see the effort go up, judge it again, and get stuck in a cycle of dysfunction. This mental process is why a lot of modern self-improvement methods don't work. The fitness industry makes a lot of money off of people who join gyms in January with a lot of motivation, work too hard for 2 weeks, get tired, and quit by February. The more they try to change themselves overnight, the more likely they are to fail. The same thing happens when people go on diets. They eat too much when they restrict themselves too much. The same thing happens with productivity systems. When they plan too much, they fail. The paradox also explains why some Eastern philosophies stress non-action or wu-wei. These traditions acknowledged millennia ago what Dostoevsky expressed in literature. that excessive exertion frequently disturbs the natural progression of success. Dostoevsky's viewpoint diverged significantly from Eastern philosophy. He did not promote passive acceptance or the eradication of desire. Instead, he looked into how Western consciousness, which focuses on individual will and rational control, leads to unique ways of self-sabotage. Comprehending this paradox does not necessitate the relinquishment of all endeavors or objectives. Instead, it suggests a different way to look at striving. You might think of it as swimming in the ocean. If you fight a riptide, you'll get tired and be pulled farther from shore. If you swim at an angle and go with the current instead of against it, you'll get to safety. The effort is still there, but instead of a desperate struggle, it becomes smart navigation. This principle is shown over and over again by Dostoevsky's characters. They make plans, plots, and schemes to be happy or successful, but their complicated mental structures fall apart. Their own smart thinking is what gets them into trouble. They think too much and end up paralyzed, or they push too hard in one direction and cause an equal and opposite reaction. The more they try to take charge, the more their lives fall apart. Dostoevsky posits that amidst this chaos exists an alternative form of wisdom, one that arises not from increased effort, but from comprehending the inherent limitations and contradictions of human endeavor. The Underground Man is the best example of this way of thinking about contradictory effort. He is one of literature's most disturbing and deep characters. Dostoevsky's 1864 short story Notes from Underground is a letter from him to you from St. Petersburg, where he has chosen to live alone. For more than 20 years, he has lived in what he calls his underground, away from other people. He doesn't really have a basement. It's just a place in his mind where he feels very alone and cut off. You can be the most self-aware person by being an underground man. He thinks about thinking, goes over his studies, and asks questions until he can't think of anything else to do. You can see him think for pages about whether or not to run into a police officer who was rude to him on the street before. He thinks about this fight for months, practices walking, saves money for nice clothes, and writes and rewrites fake fights. When the time comes, the police officer doesn't even see him because he worked so hard to get ready for it. The act has lost all meaning and effect. He can't move because he has what he calls the disease of consciousness. When you ask the underground man about normal people, or men of action, they only see one side of every story. He sees endless problems and contradictions, while other people act on impulse or belief. Are you ready to start a career? He can see all the ways it could go wrong, all the compromises that need to be made, and how useless success in this world is in the end. Do you feel something? He quickly starts to doubt its truth, and wonders if he's just acting out his feelings instead of having them. He thinks about it until the need to do it goes away. Dostoevsky made this figure because he didn't agree with the radical ideas of the time. In the 1860s, Russian philosophers believed that individuals' behaviors could be reduced to rational self-interest. If people had the right education and social conditions, they would easily know what was best for them. Society could be like a machine, with everyone doing their best. The underground man's job is to get rid of this idea. He does things that are bad for him on purpose to show that he's not a piano key or an organ stop that reacts normally to things. His famous story about his toothache shows how rebellious he is. It makes sense for someone to get help if their teeth hurt. The underground man doesn't want it, and he even likes his pain. At night, he moans loudly because he knows it annoys other people, and they hate him for it. He enjoys making them angry and watching himself fall. The more he tries to be logical and get help, the more he wants to prove his freedom by going through pain that doesn't make sense. His job is a great example of the paradox. He could get ahead in his job as a government worker by working hard and playing the political game. Instead, he gets ruder and enjoys not being able to be bribed out of spite, not because he is morally better. He eventually retires with a small inheritance and lives in squalor. The opposite happens when there is a chance for normal success. He seems to want to fail more the easier it is for him to see how to succeed. The underground man's romantic escapades show a different side of his hyperconscious self-defeat. You see him meet Liza, a young prostitute he meets in a brothel. He talks beautifully about her chances for a better life, and his thoughts of love and family make her cry. She really feels something, and even goes to see him later to ask for the forgiveness he offered. But he gets scared when he meets a real person. He is afraid that what he says is working too well. He makes fun of her, and she leaves. He then tortures himself with sadness while saying he would do it again. He keeps remembering this pattern. He ended his friendships with school friends because he thought he was smarter than them. His need to fit in and his need to push everyone away at the same time ruins social events. He couldn't do his job because of mental health issues which hurt his professional relationships. The more he tries to connect with others or do things by normal standards, the more alone he probably makes himself. The underground man is scary because he is so smart. You can't just say he's crazy or nervous. He has some really bad ideas about how people work out. He knows exactly how people will act, how groups work, and the things that people do that don't make sense to most people. He doesn't have a problem with not knowing enough. He has too much. He thinks too much, sees too clearly, and looks too closely. The underground man shows what happens when the paradox of effort is pushed too far. It's hard to do anything because you can always come up with a reason not to. Every idea breaks down when you look at it closely. It seems fake when you look at yourself feeling something. People should be able to succeed if they are smart, aware, and can think critically. But these skills often get in the way. But Dostoevsky doesn't just use the underground man as a story to scare people. You can see some uncomfortable truths about awareness by putting yourself in this character's shoes. He may differ from individuals who contribute to society in degree rather than in kind. People who have overthought their actions, questioned their motivations, or hurt their own progress have reached the edge of his underground. He lives there all the time, a prophet of the paralysis that comes from being too aware of yourself. The underground man's extreme case shows a trap that you probably know all too well. Thinking too much can paralyze you. Dostoevsky understood that the capacity for analysis, ostensibly an evolutionary advantage, can transform into a self-imposed confinement. The more you think about a choice, the more things you have to think about. As you add more things to the mix, it gets harder to see a way forward. What starts as a smart idea turns into a mental loop that never ends and stops you from doing anything real. Think about how this changes the decisions you make every day. You have to choose a place to eat dinner. It's easy enough until you start to look into it. What kinds of food make you feel good? What place requires the least amount of travel? How about the prices, the reviews, and the mood? You look at a lot of apps, read a lot of reviews, compare meals, and figure out how long the trip will take. You still don't know what to do after 45 minutes, and you're very hungry. The tools that were supposed to help you make the best choice didn't work. When this happens with important decisions in life, the results are bad. You can't change your career if you try to guess every possible outcome. You learn about different businesses, look at job markets, guess what the next big thing will be, network with other professionals, take tests, and make spreadsheets that are hard to understand. Every piece of information makes me think of more questions. Your research always shows you something new to think about, so there is never a perfect time. You still have the same job after years. Even though you've outgrown it, you aren't stuck because of things that are happening outside of you. You're stuck because of how you think. People's relationships suffer the most when they think too much. You look for hidden meanings in every text message, break down conversations for small clues, and make predictions about the future based on small interactions. It's hard to talk naturally when you have to think about every word. The more you try to figure out and control how relationships work through analysis, the more fake intense they become. Your partner can tell that you're being careful with your words because they can tell the difference between a real answer and a processed output. Dostoevsky understood that excessive contemplation can ensnare one in temporal confines. You can't be in the present, which is where things really happen. You're stuck between the past and the future. Your mind goes over things that have already happened and tries to find new ways to understand them, new ways to respond, and missed chances. It also thinks about and talks about problems and conversations that might happen in the future, and it gets ready for things that might never happen. The more you think about these things, the smaller the present moment gets, which is the only time you can really do anything. Overthinking has the same effects on the body as it does on the mind. Your body acts as if things are real when you think about them. Stress hormones fill your body when you think about hard conversations that haven't happened yet. Your heart rate goes up when you lie in bed and think about the talk 15 times. When you try to calm down by thinking, you get more upset. When you try to solve problems by thinking about them, you make new ones that only exist in your head but have real-world effects. This trap is a lot worse now because of technology. You can find an endless amount of information, opinions, and points of view on any choice. You can keep looking into what older generations decided with little information. There are always new reviews of products, expert opinions, scientific studies, and personal comments coming out. As you learn more, it gets harder to see your way. There is now an endless amount of information that can cause analysis paralysis. It's even easier to overthink things when you use social media. You watch other people's carefully planned lives, think about the choices they make, and compare how you feel with what you see of them. Every choice comes with the possibility of being judged, future posts, and how the public sees it. It seems like an easy question to answer when you think about how it will look in pictures, what it says about you, and how it compares to what other people in your social circle wear. Dostoevsky had an idea that was ahead of what modern psychology knows about ruminating and how it can make people sad and anxious. You try to figure things out in your head because you think that if you think about them long enough, they will make sense. Instead, you create what psychologists now call cognitive loops. These are thought patterns that make you feel good but keep you from solving the problem. No matter how hard you try, you can't think your way out of the loop. The way we are taught makes this mistake even worse. You learn that being smart means looking at things from all sides, that making good choices takes a lot of research, and that being smarter than the competition means you're better. These lessons are good for schoolwork because they tell you what to do and give you the right answers. When used in life's confusing and messy situations, they cause the paralysis that Dostoevsky wrote about. Things that helped you do well in school now make your life harder. The mistake of overthinking is most obvious when you're trying to be creative. Writers feel like they can't choose the right words when they see blank pages. Musicians keep changing songs, which makes them less free. Artists stop working on projects that they know will never be as good as they want them to be. The more you try to make something better by breaking it down, the less you get to the real expression that makes art great. Dostoevsky wrote best when he had to meet deadlines and couldn't keep changing things. He had to write quickly and cheaply, instead of trying to be perfect. Not thinking too much doesn't mean you have to stop thinking altogether. You need to be able to tell when analysis is no longer helping you and is instead working for itself, like any other tool. The mind works best when it is used correctly and then put away when it is not needed. Dostoevsky says that the key to knowledge is not to think more, but to know when you've gone from useful thought to the never-ending maze of analysis that only makes things more complicated. If you like these philosophical ideas and want to learn more about ideas that go against common sense, you might want to subscribe to get more content that makes you think about life's contradictions and the people who have tried to solve them. We are just beginning to look into Dostoevsky's ideas, and the patterns he discovered over 100 years ago are still surprisingly helpful for figuring out how to live in the modern world. When you understand the limits of your thoughts, you can directly access one of Dostoevsky's most audacious concepts. Logic can betray you. People have always told you that reason is the best thing about people, and that it can fix problems and make life better. Dostoevsky noticed that people in his time worshipped logic and scientific rationalism, which meant they thought people could be boiled down to simple rules. He noticed the start of a strange kind of craziness In this faith, the issue originates from the fundamental assertion of logic that sound reasoning results in accurate conclusions, which subsequently yield appropriate behaviors. You use logic to make decisions, build your arguments, and follow the rules of logic. People often end up in chaos, even though they plan their lives very carefully. Even societies that are planned out in a very logical way end up being very unhappy. Relationships can still fail, even when they are well thought out. It seems like it will give you power, but it doesn't. Dostoevsky observed that exclusively logical thinking diminishes significant aspects of individuals that resist categorization. Love doesn't make sense for some reason. You can't fight or reason your way into getting someone to really love you. Being creative is the opposite of what makes sense. The most profound artistic expressions emanate from enigmatic realms that elude rational comprehension or replication. Faith operates independently of logical evidence. Most of the time, the things that give life meaning don't make sense. When you try to live only by logic, you end up in a dark place. You miss the gut feelings, gut instincts, and small signs that help people do the right thing. If you only look at the words and what they mean in a formal way, you might miss the tone, body language, context, and the emotions that aren't said but are still there that carry the real message. The more you rely on logic alone, the more you are like someone trying to find their way with only a map and not paying attention to the real world. When making moral decisions, think about what this means. If you only use logic, you might be able to see that lying can sometimes get you what you want. You might betray a friend for your own benefit, if it makes sense for you to do so. Utilitarian calculus may support actions that benefit the majority, despite causing harm to a minority. But there is something about people that makes these logical results wrong. Dostoevsky says that this rebellion isn't a failure of reason. It's an acknowledgement of facts that logic can't explain. The market is a clear example of where reasoning fails. Rational agent models in economics always fail to predict how people will act in the real world. People don't make things better the way equations say they do. They buy things based on how they feel, follow trends that don't make sense, and feel scared and happy in ways that don't make sense. The more economists try to use logic to figure out why people do things, the less accurate their guesses get. The tyranny of logic manifests in personal development as an obsession with optimization. You keep track of everything that happens in your life, measure everything, and make complicated systems to get the most done. There are numbers and rules for everything in life, from sleep optimization to nutrition algorithms, to productivity models, to relationship scorecards. People who follow these crazy systems often say they feel empty and disconnected, as if the most important parts of life have been taken away. Logic is especially bad for feelings. You feel sad and try to figure out why by thinking about it. You feel happy and then try to figure out what caused it and how to make it happen again. But feelings are like information systems that work faster and more broadly than conscious thought. When you think about how you felt, it usually turns into something else, usually a pale version of the original experience that is affected by self-consciousness. The logical mind's need for things to be the same is another trap. People are naturally contradictory, and they can want, believe, and want different things at the same time. You have to choose a side and stick to your beliefs, according to logic. But being forced to be consistent often means giving up parts of yourself that are important. To be completely logical, you have to forget about all the things you believe. Dostoevsky demonstrated this through characters who pursue ideas to their logical conclusions, resulting in absurd or terrifying outcomes. Raskolnikov makes a strong case for why he should be able to kill an old pawn shop owner in Crime and Punishment. His reasoning is valid, provided one accepts the premises that certain individuals hold greater significance than others, that progress necessitates sacrifice, and that some individuals possess moral superiority over others. Everything makes sense, but the act breaks him down mentally and shows him things about people that his rational mind can't understand. Dostoevsky lived in a time when scientific materialism said that logic and the laws of physics could explain everything. Being aware would be reduced to brain chemistry, love to evolutionary needs, and beauty to mathematical numbers. People still try to use biology, genetics, or computer models to explain everything about what it means to be human. These frameworks provide valuable insights, however. If we regard them as comprehensive explanations, we commit what Dostoevsky termed a fundamental category error. We confuse the map with the territory. When logic is your main way to live, you can't use other ways to know things. Intuition gets weaker when you don't use it. Emotional intelligence gets worse. It becomes harder to have faith, wonder, and surprise. You are like someone who tries to enjoy music by studying the sound waves, or a picture by looking at the chemicals that make up the pigments. Even if the analysis is correct, it doesn't get to the heart of why these events are important. The answer is not to stop using logic, but to learn how to use it correctly and when to stop using it. Logic is great at solving math problems, finding bugs in code, and finding flaws in arguments. It becomes dangerous when used for something other than what it was made for. Dostoevsky said that being wise means knowing when to use logic and when to stop using it, when to think, and when to just feel or do something without thinking about it first. Dostoevsky was most interested in free will and the need for people to fight back. This perspective on self-sabotage as an assertion of freedom directly connects to this theme. There are things you can't control that affect your life, like physical laws, genetics, and the environment. But something inside you wants to be free and needs proof that it can act on its own. It wants proof that you're not just a biological machine that runs fixed code. This need to fight is strongest when freedom seems most at risk. Determinism was becoming more popular when Dostoevsky was alive. Scientists believed that behavior was rooted in chemistry. Social theorists posited that actions were influenced by economic forces, and psychologists delineated the unconscious motivations that drive human decision-making. It felt like every new piece of information we learned made real free will less possible. Today, you face an even crazier version. Neuroscientists say they can see decisions being made before we are aware of them. Algorithms can predict behavior with uncanny accuracy, and genetic markers can link life events. Indeterminism is like a cage that gets smaller and smaller over time. With this in mind, rebellion is the right thing to do. You don't rebel because it makes sense or is good for you. You rebel because it shows that you are free and can choose. This is exactly what the underground man's method says. 2 times 2 equals 4 means that necessity is holding you down, while 2 times 2 equals 5 means that you are free. It's not the math mistake that matters. It's the ability to choose falsehood over truth. This need is what drives a lot of rebellions every day. You set an alarm and hit snooze, not because you were tired, but to show that you were in charge of what you did in the past. You make plans and don't keep them. Say you'll do what you said you'd do, and then break the rules you set. Every little rebellion reminds you that you can change your habits at any time, and that the choices you made yesterday don't have to limit you. Kids are the best example of this need. If you tell a child not to touch something, you'll see their hand move toward it as if it were drawn to it. The ban makes people want it. They don't rebel because they want to be mean. They do it to test the limits, show that they have free will, and show that they are separate beings who can make choices. Adults make this desire more complex, but they don't outgrow it. You learn more subtle ways to fight. People who live under an authoritarian government feel like they have to fight even more. Dostoevsky witnessed this phenomenon in Russia during the Tsarist period and believed it would exacerbate under any totalitarian regime. The more a system tries to control how people act, the more creative and desperate people get when they want to fight back. People will do anything for a small amount of freedom, like reading a book, going to a meeting, or having a moment of pure joy. The danger is part of what makes freedom real. People can rebel in their own ways, in today's business world. When businesses try to change the culture, get more work done, and control how employees act, they find that workers become more independent. They waste time by using the internet for personal reasons, making unofficial networks that go against company rules, and making up their own languages and routines that the bosses can't understand. The rebellion may seem small, but it is very important because it protects people's honor in systems that would otherwise turn them into resources. You can tell this by how you use technology. There will always be people who don't like devices that are meant to get people more involved and control their behavior. You download apps that promise to help you cut down on screen time, but you don't follow your own rules. You know that social media is trying to control your attention, but you keep going back to it. This is partly because you're addicted, and partly because you want to show that you can be controlled. Because the formulas are so predictable, it's harder to go against the rules, and more important than ever, the need to fight makes it hard to make yourself better. You can't just decide to get better and then do it like you would with software changes. You can't change anything good unless the part of you that doesn't want to change, even you, is okay with it. You can't push this rebellious side too far if you want to change, but you can work with it and find ways to get better that feel like choices instead of giving in. Dostoevsky knew that you can't explain this need with just reason. There is no good reason to choose pain over ease, chaos over order, or freedom over safety. We need things because we can think and feel, which is what makes us different from computers. You rebel because it shows that you are more than just what you have learned and put into practice. This way of life is a paradox. When there is complete rebellion, there is chaos and destruction. If you do everything right, your soul will die. You need to find ways to respect your need for freedom while still following the rules. This could mean being very picky about which rebellions you support, allowing for controlled chaos, or finding systems that can handle people's bad behavior without breaking. The smartest schools know how this works. They make places where people can fight and show how much they want to be free. Universities have a history of not following the rules. Military groups set up safe places where people can let out their anger. In healthy relationships, there is room for freedom while still being committed. These accommodations aren't mistakes. They're just ways of showing that people will always need proof of their freedom. When you know you need to change, it changes how you work on yourself and how you deal with people in power. Instead of trying to get rid of the feeling of restlessness, you should try to figure out what it means. Freedom, an uncertain future, or something that is already set in stone. Rebellion can be a sign of wisdom that goes beyond just thinking things through. It's just the human spirit speaking up sometimes. You need to know the difference between these situations, so you don't hurt yourself by rebelling for no reason or being too obedient. Dostoevsky's darkest thought comes from realizing how much freedom costs. Awareness itself can cause pain. You know more than any other living thing. You can see your own thoughts, think about your life, and look back and forward in time. This gift that seems to make you better than animals also causes horrible pain that simpler beings can't understand. You suffer more beautifully when you become more aware. Animals experience physical pain and fear in the present, but not psychological pain. A dog doesn't lie awake at night, worrying about dying, wondering what its life is all about, or torturing itself with memories of being embarrassed. Yes, you do. Your mind makes you suffer in the present, like when you feel bad about the past, or worry about the future. These things don't happen in the real world, but they feel very real to you. People suffer because of the same things that make civilization, art, and purpose possible. Dostoevsky discovered various mechanisms through which awareness induces suffering. First, you have to compare. People are always judging your life, your goals, and what could have been. If you compare yourself to rich people, it can make you feel very poor, even if you have a lot of stuff. When you think about how much potential they have that they haven't reached, they feel like a failure. Consciousness makes every achievement and every feeling of happiness only last for a short time. Everyone knows they're going to die, and it affects everything they do. You know you're going to die, but you don't know when or how. What you know changes how you see every event, relationship, and goal. You are always aware of death, but animals only react to threats to their lives. It whispers in conversations and hides behind plans, making all progress useless in the end. The more you realize how short life is, the more it stops you or makes you worry. Self-awareness makes pain worse by making it happen over and over again. You feel pain, then shame for feeling pain, then anger for feeling shame, and finally hopelessness about the whole thing. With each new level of awareness, the pain gets worse. A simple no turns into a long story about how unworthy you are, how mean other people are, how relationships work, and how you can't handle rejection well. Consciousness shapes random events into lasting patterns. Memory, which stores awareness, becomes a place where it can be tortured. Bad things happen to you more than once. People can still cringe when they think about an embarrassing moment from years ago. Bad relationships can ruin good ones. Mistakes made in the past have an effect on the decisions people make now. If you are more aware, your list of things that make you suffer will be longer and more detailed. Being aware of other people adds to the pain. You know what you think and what other people might think about you. Every interaction has a lot of layers. What you think, what they think, what you think, they think, and what they think, you think, they think. This hall of mirrors makes it easier to get lost, feel embarrassed, and feel like you're the only one. Consciousness is so complicated that animals can't act in a simple, direct way. As you get smarter and more sensitive, the pain of being aware gets worse. Dostoevsky said that the happiest people are often the dumbest, not because they are good, but because they don't know how bad they are. They don't notice small insults, worry about complicated futures, or think so much about their feelings that they feel helpless. You see the contradictions in life, the cruelty of people, and the biggest mysteries of existence more clearly the more aware you become. Being clear hurts. The stresses of modern life make it harder for people to be aware of their responsibilities. You hear about pain all over the world all the time, and you compare your life to that of billions of other people. People can now say what they think about you on social media in a way that has never been done before. Technology keeps track of everything you do, like how many steps you take, how many calories you eat, how many hours you sleep, and how much money you spend. It hurts to look at life too closely. But Dostoevsky didn't like it when people slept or didn't know things. He knew that being aware, even if it hurts, gives life meaning, beauty, and the chance to love. Knowing what hurts you can also make you kind, creative, and able to rise above it all. You can't numb your awareness in a way that doesn't also numb your joy, wonder, and connection. The pain comes with everything that makes life worth living. This makes therapy a paradox. Drugs, distractions, or denial are not good ways to deal with pain. They usually make it worse. The more you try not to think about something, the more you notice it. Fighting consciousness with awareness makes the loops that cause suffering worse. Dostoevsky said that the only real relief is to accept the burden of awareness instead of trying to escape it. The underground man is the most painful kind of consciousness. He thinks himself to sleep, studies everything until he can't do anything, and thinks about things until they are just ideas. His heightened awareness does not confer wisdom or tranquility. It merely exacerbates his suffering. But he can't want to be dumb. Some people would rather be aware of their pain than not be aware of their comfort. When you understand that being aware is always linked to suffering, it changes how you deal with your own mental pain. You stop thinking of existential worry, self-doubt, and psychological complexity as problems that need to be fixed, and start thinking of them as part of being aware. This doesn't get rid of pain, but it does change it from a disease to a normal part of being human. The goal is no longer to be aware of pain-free awareness, which is impossible, but to learn how to carry the weight of consciousness with grace. This knowledge of the suffering that is built into consciousness helps us understand why Dostoevsky was against the biggest idea of his time, making perfect social systems. He used the Crystal Palace, which was built for London's Great Exhibition in 1851, as a main example of utopian thought. It was made of iron and glass, was scientifically accurate, and was filled with the best things that people have ever done. It was the dream of a fully rational society. These ideas can still be seen today in every attempt to solve problems by engineering better systems. The Crystal Palace trouble starts with an alluring promise. With enough information, technology, and smart planning, we can end all human pain. If you make the right political order, there will be no more conflict. If you build up the economy correctly, hunger will go away. If you use the right kind of social engineering, people will become better by nature. Every factor was taken into account. Every need was met, and all issues were resolved. While letting light in, the glass walls keep out chaos, making a safe place for people to thrive. In this image, Dostoevsky did not see paradise, but a high-tech prison. There is nothing human about the Crystal Palace because it is so beautiful, because the walls are so logical, you can't break through them. Its rules are scientifically the best, so you can't break them. You can't complain about how it's set up, because it's comfortable in every way. The palace becomes totalitarian, not by forcing people to do what it wants, but by getting rid of any reason to disagree. Think about how this relationship works in modern efforts to find the best solution. With sensors, algorithms, and data analysis, smart cities claim to get rid of waste. Every traffic light reacts to the current situation. Every resource is used in the best way possible, and every process makes the most of what it does. Still, something in you turns away from this picture. The city that is perfectly efficient makes people feel suffocated because it doesn't allow for human messiness, unpredictability, or the freedom to be inefficient. The open office is the Crystal Palace of the workplace. It is open, collaborative, and was created by experts to encourage creativity and communication. Every detail was studied, and every part was made to be as useful to people as possible. But workers in these places say they feel open, watched, and like they can't find privacy or quiet. Things that are supposed to make work life easier end up making it more stressful. People want walls, doors, and the freedom to be seen and not optimized. Social media sites are like digital crystal palaces. They say that perfect communication tools will bring people together and make people feel less lonely. Algorithms make sure you see only the things that interest you, meet with people who are a good fit for you, and never miss important news. The engineering does a great job of reaching its goals. Still, users say they are feeling more anxious, alone, and hopeless than ever before. The processes work too well, which leads to addiction instead of satisfaction. The Crystal Palace problem also affects how people grow as people. You come across programs that promise to completely change your life with perfect methods. Do these things every morning, use these ways to get things done, and make the most of these habits, and you'll reach your full potential. The tools come with support groups, apps, and trackers. Everything you need to be successful, carefully thought out and proven by science. Still, the most optimized people often seem the least happy, like they're stuck in cages they made for themselves. When schools try to make learning the same for everyone, they have the mindset of the Crystal Palace. Curriculum planners find the best information, come up with effective ways to teach it, and test to make sure the results are accurate. Each student has the same carefully planned experience that is meant to make them well-informed individuals. Because the system is so full, it stops people from being creative, curious, and taking the unexpected paths that lead to real learning. Students don't protest because they are lazy. They do it because they feel like something important is being taken away. Dostoevsky thought that the Crystal Palace goes against something very important. People need problems, strife, and the chance of failing. When there are no challenges, strength fades. When there are no problems to solve, mind stops growing. Without having to go through pain, kindness never grows. The palace's comfort turns into a death because it takes away the struggles that give life value and help people grow. This explains why a lot of people in wealthy groups are depressed and anxious. The conditions of the Crystal Palace were met, material problems were solved, physical needs were met, and there were lots of possibilities. But instead of happiness, this makes me feel strangely empty. Something to push against, get past, or give your life structure and meaning is what you need. The palace's smooth walls don't have any grips for climbing. The political crystal palace comes in many shapes and sizes, but it always offers the same thing: a system that works so well that politics is no longer needed. Every political philosophy, communist, capitalist, scientific, or anarchist, claims to be able to fix the most important problems with how people are organized. Just put in place the right system, and you'll see people thrive. Dostoevsky said that these attempts would fail, not because they weren't carried out well, but because they were too good. People would fight back more strongly against them the better they worked. This is clear in the way that intentional societies don't work. Groups of smart, good-hearted people plan societies that don't have property fights, sexual jealousy, or power struggles. They come up with rules for every event, ways for people to interact, and choices to be made. The towns will eventually fall apart, not because of pressure from outside, but because of rebellion within. Because their systems are so complete, the forces that kill them are also very complete. The Crystal Palace problem shows why small steps toward growth often work better than big changes. Systems that accept that people are flawed, include inefficiencies, and allow for unrest and chaos last longer than those that try to be perfect. It seems that the more chaotic and contradictory plans work better with the way people are than the more logical ones. Understanding the problem at the Crystal Palace doesn't mean giving up on all efforts to make things better or more organized. Instead, it recommends working with people instead of against them. Systems need ways to get out of them, places where people can fight, and ways to recognize irrational needs. The goal changes from getting rid of problems to making systems that are flexible enough to handle conflict between people without breaking. The failure of the Crystal Palace points to a different way of being, accepting the inconsistencies that make up life instead of trying to solve them. You've been taught since you were a child to be consistent, to make sure that your beliefs and deeds match up, and to show the world a full picture of who you are. However, Dostoevsky noticed that the most real people are living contradictions, and that trying to make things make sense is like committing existential violence against your nature. You hold many people who won't blend. You need both alone time and social interaction, safety and excitement, habit and spontaneity. You have beliefs that go against each other, wants that can't go together, and feelings that shouldn't be there at the same time. The smart thing to do would be to pick a side, ease the emotions, and bring everyone together. But this resolution means cutting off parts of yourself that are just as real and important. Take a look at how this affects your job choices. You might really love both safety and danger, being creative and having enough money, being in charge and working with others. In traditional thought, you have to choose between being an employer or an employee, an artist or a professional, a specialist or a generalist. But making this choice for you makes a false option. People who are happiest often find ways to honor their opposing urges instead of putting them to rest. Relationships show how important it is to accept contradictions. You need to be alone, but want to be close to someone. You want to know a lot about your partner, but you also need some mystery to stay interested. Routines make you feel good, but you need new things to keep you interested. Trying to solve these problems by picking a side hurts relationships. Healthy relationships don't try to solve these problems. Instead, they dance around them. The digital age makes conflicts worse instead of better. You value privacy, but you share everything online all the time. You're looking for real connections on sites that are made for performance. You want to disconnect, even though you need technology for work and relationships. Trying to be consistent, whether by cutting off all ties or fully embracing someone, feels just as false. To live a genuine life, you have to accept these contradictions as normal parts of modern life, not as problems that need to be fixed. When it comes to paradoxes, moral life may be the worst. You believe in being honest, but you also know that being kind sometimes means lying. Even when they are at odds, you value both justice and kindness. You believe in both individual freedom and shared duty, as well as in social equality and personal success. Political ideas that say systematic thought can solve these problems will always feel incomplete because they don't take into account how complicated ethical life is. Dostoevsky's figures are full of these contradictions, and don't try to hide them. They are both mean and nice, smart and stupid, agnostic and deeply spiritual at the same time. The fact that they contradict each other makes them seem more real than characters made to show consistent psychological or philosophical theories. You see more of yourself in their flaws than in any logical ideal of how people should act. When people try to get rid of contradictions, they often fail horribly. People who seem very constant on the outside often have the most dramatic opposites in their shadow sides. The repressed contradiction comes back with interest. The preacher who talks about sin while quietly committing it. The rationalist who makes irrational choices, and the minimalist who hoards digital files. What you deny about yourself gets stronger when you deny it. Even science has learned to accept some contradictions. Light can act like a wave or a particle based on how you look at it. Quantum mechanics shows us a world where different states can coexist until measurement forces a resolution. A lot of the most advanced physics sounds like mysticism because it recognizes contradictions that normal reasoning can't explain. At its most basic level, reality seems to accept contradiction. This has real-world effects on how you go about your daily life. You might not need to suffer over wants that are at odds with each other. Instead, you could see them as signs of how complicated you are. There are real parts of you that want to travel and parts that want to stay home. You could respect each one in turn, instead of making one choice that lasts forever. The conflict stops being a problem and starts being a rhythm. Personal growth plans that allow for conflict work better in the long run than those that demand perfection. You aren't making a final unified self. Instead, you are learning how to dance with all of your different selves. It's less about fixing contradictions as you grow, and more about getting better at holding them without breaking. Being mature doesn't mean being consistent, but getting more comfortable with how complicated you are. People often fear conflict because they feel like they need to be predictable, marketable, and easy to understand. People don't have to be constant with brands, but brands do. You are being asked to write personal stories that make sense, elevator pitches for who you are, and goal statements for your life. Some things might become clearer after doing these tasks, but at the cost of making your real complexity seem flat and easy. Accepting contradiction doesn't mean giving up all order and logic. Instead, it means making frames that are adaptable enough to hold paradox. You might have consistent values, even if the way you show them is through deeds that are at odds with them. You could work toward different goals at the same time. Instead of one after the other, you could show different sides of yourself in different situations without feeling like you're lying. Part of the underground man's tragedy is that he tries to think his way through conflicts instead of just living them. He hurts himself with pain while he tries to figure out if he's good or bad, smart or dumb, worthy or not worthy. The issue is with the questions themselves. People are both good and bad, smart and dumb, valuable and useless, but not one after the other. When you accept this, the hard work of self-resolution is over. Dostoevsky says that paradoxes are the way that the deepest truths are hidden. Selfishness and selflessness go hand in hand in love. To be free, you have to both fight and give up. Suffering is a part of happiness. There is stupidity in wisdom. There are no contradictions to solve here. There are stresses to live with. When you try to take out one side while getting rid of the other, you destroy the live reality of human experience. One of Dostoevsky's most useful ideas comes from having to deal with these contradictions. The art of not trying. You've looked into how too much effort makes the opposite happen, how awareness hurts, and how logic can become a trap. Now the question is how to live. Now that we know these things, Dostoevsky noticed that the most important things in life don't always happen when you're trying hard. Sometimes they happen when you're actively not trying, when you step back and let natural processes happen. This isn't the passivity of giving up or the laziness of not doing anything. Instead, it sounds like how skilled athletes talk about peak performance. a state where training stops and the body works without any help from the mind. You've planned ahead, practiced and built up your skills, but when it matters most, trying harder stops the flow. The basketball player who plans to shoot fails. The artist who focuses on where to put their fingers falls off. Excellence happens when hard work turns into easy action. Creative work is where the art of not trying shines through the most. Writers know what it's like to squish words onto a page and pound out sentences with pure drive. The writing that comes out of this is dull and mechanical, missing the spark that makes reading fun. After that, there will be days when words come easily. People talk for themselves, and time seems to fly by. The writer is more of a conduit than an artist. They find the story instead of making it up. This trend shows up in how people solve problems in many fields. Scientists say that big ideas don't come to them when they are analyzing things very deeply, but when they are taking walks, taking showers, or just relaxing for a while. The answer seems clear and complete now, but it's impossible to get there by working directly on it. Months or years of hard work set the stage for the success, but it took taking a step back, letting go, and letting the unconscious handle what the conscious mind couldn't handle. Relationships make it very clear how to master the art of not trying. It seems like the more you try to make someone love you, the less they want to. People naturally stay away from people who are desperate because they give off a lot of energy. But attraction often comes back when you stop trying, focus on your own life, and find real hobbies outside of the relationship. Not because you're playing games or following a plan, but because not needing something is more appealing than desperately wanting something. The idea applies to happiness as well. The American Declaration of Independence talks about trying to be happy, but Dostoevsky thought that this was a very bad idea. Happiness comes from doing things that are important, not from pursuing them directly. People who are always checking their happiness levels, trying to find the best ways to be happy, and thinking about what makes them happy, usually end up being unhappy. If you get caught up in work, relationships, or a cause and forget about being happy, you may find that you were already happy. Sleep is a great way to think about how to not try. You can't try to sleep and make yourself sleep. You can't find it no matter how hard you try. Giving up something in order to sleep is like letting go of the consciousness that wants to sleep. Every sleep hygiene habit and strategy for getting the most out of sleep only works if they make it possible for this surrender to happen. In the last step, you never try to fall asleep. Instead, you let sleep take you. This paradox is hard for today's society of productivity. You're told to work hard and make the most of every moment. Still, the most effective people often work in short bursts of intense focus, followed by periods of not caring about anything. They know that in order to be creative and solve problems, there needs to be time when nothing seems to be happening but important work is still being done. Working less isn't the same as the art of not trying. It means working with the natural processes instead of against them. Common sense about how to improve yourself is challenged by this concept. You are told to make plans, picture yourself succeeding, and keep your mind on your goals at all times. Planning is important, but Dostoevsky noticed that the most important things in life often happen by accident while you're not paying attention. The job opening comes up during a casual chat, not at a planned networking event. When you're not looking for love, it finds you. You grow as a person through events that you didn't plan, not through plans you made. These days, it's really hard not to try in this digital world. Algorithms that are meant to get people involved put ongoing pressure on people to improve, compete, and perform. It feels like you're falling behind every time you don't do something useful. But the most successful digital artists often say that they made their best work when they stopped trying to trick computers and just made things that interested them. It turns out that authenticity can't be adjusted into being. To understand the art of not trying, you first need to tell it apart from real laziness or lack of duty. Still, you show up, work, and do what you need to do. You try hard, but you don't hold on too tightly, because that's how effort turns into self-defeat. Like a skilled martial artist who stays calm while fighting, you give it your all while staying at ease inside. The effort is there, but it doesn't push against itself. This way of thinking changes how you deal with loss and setbacks. Failing doesn't hurt as much when you're not trying so hard to do well. It turns into information instead of a verdict, a turn instead of a dead end. The person who practices not trying can change more quickly because they aren't putting too much stock in one result. They keep up what Dostoevsky might have called a holy indifference. They care deeply while hanging on loosely. Moral and spiritual life are part of the art. When you try really hard to be good, you become more aware of how bad you are. It gets farther away the more you try to reach enlightenment. It's not always through studying religion or doing good things that Dostoevsky's most religious characters come to faith. Sometimes they come to faith after failing at thinking or working their way to God. You can't earn grace by trying. That's what it means. In real life, the art of not trying means making room in your life for not trying. There is time without goals, tasks without results, and relationships without plans. You have to be aware of when trying harder isn't working and try taking a step back. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all, and the best thing you can do with effort is to let go of it. Not as a technique or plan, but as an awareness of how life really works when you think you have power over it. The art of not trying naturally brings up a very important question. How can you live with these ideas without giving up or becoming hopelessly depressed? Dostoevsky saw a lot of people who, when faced with the contradictions and burdens of life, decided to withdraw or destroy themselves. But his work points to a different way to go, to find order in chaos instead of trying to get rid of it. This balance isn't a fixed middle ground. It's a way of dealing with the uncertainty that comes with life. You have to deal with a real problem, realizing that too much effort backfires, that logic has limits, that awareness causes suffering, and that perfect systems don't work could make someone give up all effort, all logic, all consciousness, and all order in their life. This answer doesn't get to the heart of Dostoevsky's point. He didn't say people should just accept chaos. Instead, he said they should find ways to live in it, like a sailor who can't control the ocean, but can still steer their ship. The balance starts with work that is just right. You know that if you try too hard, you will fail, but that doesn't mean you should stop trying. You learn to tell the difference between when effort helps and when it hurts. As an example, physical training is helpful. Athletes work hard during practice, but they know they need days off to recover. They are almost at the point of pointless strain, but not quite there yet. In the same way, life needs you to know when to push and when to let go. This balance includes both planning and being spontaneous. Pure rational planning doesn't work because life is bigger than any structure can hold. Pure impulse doesn't work for some goals because they need consistent work over time. Finding the right mix means making structures that are flexible enough to change when things don't go as planned. You could choose to have directions instead of destinations. Stick to routines that let you change things up and work toward your goals while keeping an open mind about new possibilities. When it comes to consciousness and its pain, balance means not trying to forget or being too aware all the time. You can't go back to animal simplicity and not have awareness. You also shouldn't make awareness stronger until it's just torture. Instead, you learn to move easily between states, being able to do deep thought when needed and action without reflection when needed. This kind of flexibility is often the goal of meditation, which helps people learn to notice their thoughts without getting caught up in them. A social life needs a certain amount of balance. Being completely real and showing all of your contradictory feelings makes it impossible for people to connect to you. It feels false and limiting to be completely consistent and show a sanitized version of yourself. To find the right mix, you need to selectively reveal different parts of your complexity to different people in different situations while staying true to your core values. You're not lying. You're just realizing that relationships come in different levels and need different amounts of complexity. To find balance in your job and business, you need to use systems without becoming consumed by them. You can be a part of capitalism without agreeing with all of its ideals. You improve your skills and reputation while keeping up hobbies outside of work. You compete when you have to, but you don't make it your religion. This isn't giving in by taking less. It's being smart enough to know that giving your whole self to an outside system means giving up parts of who you are. Balancing is harder in the internet world than in the real world. More and more, being cut off from society, work, and relationships means being cut off from electronics as well. To be fully immersed, you have to lose yourself in experiences that are meant to keep you interested instead of making you feel good. To find balance, you might have to use technology as a tool, while keeping some places and times free from its effects. You take part without giving up your freedom. In a moral sense, balance means realizing that you can do both good and bad things, but not using that knowledge as a reason to be morally lazy. Dostoevsky's characters do a lot of bad things, but the fact that they are complicated doesn't make their actions okay. Being aware of your flaws and the ways you might hurt yourself makes you more responsible, not less. You can figure out what will go wrong and plan for it. You can understand and accept other people's flaws because you know your own. How you deal with philosophy and belief shows the balance. Nihilistic paralysis happens when you are completely cynical and turn away from all meaning and worth. When you have blind faith and believe everything you are told, you become rigid. Throughout his life, Dostoevsky himself fought between doubt and faith. He found that this fight led to a more genuine spirituality than either pure skepticism or unquestioning belief. You might only hold views temporarily, acting on them while still being willing to change your mind. In real life, finding balance usually means building structures on the outside that allow for freedom on the inside. You could find stable places to live that make you feel safe enough to explore. You find steady ways to make money that let you take artistic risks. You make strong connections with people that can handle your flaws and projects. These buildings aren't cages, they're the bases that allow people to be free. Accepting the different stages of life is also part of the balance. There are times when chaos rules, and you just have to stay alive. Order wins sometimes, and you build and strengthen. You may sometimes fight against the things that hold you back. You have to give in to needs sometimes. Seeing these as stages instead of mistakes helps keep things in balance over time, even when certain moments feel out of whack. To find balance in chaos, you don't have to reach a state of stability at the end. Life keeps giving us new problems to solve, new contradictions to find, and new ways to adapt. The balance is ongoing, meaning it is always changing and never perfect. It only lives when it's moving, like riding a bike. You trip when you stop to think about it too much. If you keep moving and make small adjustments as needed, you'll stay standing even though you'll never be completely still. This moving balance lets us live with Dostoevsky's ideas without getting down. You agree that life is chaotic, but you don't let it get to you. You understand the burden of awareness while also appreciating its benefits. You know that freedom comes with terrible duty, but you still use it. You understand the limits of the system while still taking part as needed. Not perfect answers, but reasonable compromises that take into account both the contradictory nature of people and the real needs of life. Dostoevsky's last deep insight is that there is wisdom in accepting mistakes. This comes from understanding balance in chaos. You've spent your whole life getting messages telling you to get better, optimize, and always try to be a better version of yourself. Dostoevsky learned, though, that real happiness doesn't always come from being perfect. Sometimes it comes from accepting and even celebrating the flaws, failures, and limits that make you human. Realizing that perfection is a form of death is the first step toward knowledge. Good things can't get better, change, or surprise you. There is no need for any more brushstrokes in a perfect picture. There is nowhere for growth in a perfect relationship. A perfect person would be finished, whole, and mostly still. It's like how fire needs oxygen, life needs imperfection. It's not a bad thing that it has to have. It's how energy shows itself. People can relate to your flaws and use them to connect with you. The smooth skin of trying to be perfect turns people away. People can't connect with your successes the way they can with your problems. Being vulnerable builds ties that success alone can't. Others can recognize themselves and feel less alone when you talk about your confusion, your mistakes, and the gaps between your goals and your reality. The flaws you try to hide can lead to deep connections with other people. Think about how this works in artistic work. Why the most moving art doesn't usually come from being technically perfect. It comes from having flaws where people can see through. Perfect skill isn't what moves people more than a singer's voice breaking with emotion. The struggle of a writer to say what words can't say builds resonance that well-written words can't. The Japanese idea of wabi-sabi says that things that aren't perfect, don't last, or aren't finished are still beautiful. Different cultural paths led Dostoevsky to where he was. Life is interesting because it has a lot of different textures. It would be like living in a sensory deprivation tank. If everything went smoothly, there would be no room for growth, no resistance to build power against, and no surprises to spark adaptation. Your mistakes make for interesting stories. Being limited forces you to find creative answers. The plot twists that turn a normal life into an important story come from your flaws. Moral life is part of the knowledge. Someone who has never failed, never fallen, or never had to face their own wrongdoing lacks important information. Dostoevsky's most complex characters become wise by committing terrible sins like murder, betrayal, addiction, and cruelty. Not that these things are necessary or even a good idea, but people who have been through them understand humans better than people who are always good. Compassion grows when people see how weak they are together. This view changes how you deal with mistakes and guilt. You might not see them as stains that need to be cleaned up or covered. Instead, you might see them as teachers, sculptors, the forces that made you who you are today. You learned how to love better from the relationship that ended. The failure of your job showed you what's really important to you. The addiction you beat made you strong and compassionate in ways you wouldn't have gained any other way. Perfectionism turns out to be a very appealing way to hurt yourself. By setting standards that are too high, you promise failure while keeping up the appearance of having strong morals. It's always possible to say that you would have reached your goal if you had more time, money, or help. Perfectionism keeps you from facing the risk of giving your best effort and finding that it's not good enough. How you approach your goals and progress can be affected by the wisdom of imperfection. Instead of trying to get rid of all your flaws, you could focus on making progress, growing, and slowly getting better, knowing that perfection will never be possible. This doesn't mean lowering standards. It just means realizing that growth needs a path, not a final goal. Mountain climbers move forward by looking at the next ledge they can reach, instead of the top they can't reach. When it comes to relationships, accepting flaws means liking someone just the way they are, while also encouraging them to grow. When you realize that someone's flaws are just as important to who they are as their strengths, you stop trying to fix them. This doesn't mean putting up with abuse or letting bad things happen, but it does mean realizing that human love always means loving the whole person, flaws and all. These days, living in the digital world makes it very hard to accept flaws. Every picture, every sentence, and every presentation of self-curated can be changed to hide problems. But the stress of having to be perfect causes its own pain. You know that what's going on inside you doesn't match up with how you act around other people, leaving a gap that leads to nervousness and imposter syndrome. The smart thing to do is to let more of your real, flawed self show through your digital mask. As you think about how to use these ideas from Dostoevsky's thought, keep in mind that understanding is still not perfect. While you are in awareness, you can't fully understand it. You can't fully understand freedom until you use it. Being human means you can't fully understand how people behave. These limits aren't signs of lack of intelligence or effort. They're just the natural limits of thinking. Dostoevsky's theory doesn't give us any final answers, perfect systems, or ultimate answers to the problems we face as people. Instead, it gives us something more valuable: freedom to be fully human, even when that means being contradictory and flawed. To work hard without thinking, that hard work alone will lead to success. To think without believing that thought can fix everything. To protest without hurting what's important. To suffer knowingly without giving up. To fail without feeling bad about it. This is probably Dostoevsky's greatest gift. He showed that the key to knowledge is not to rise above human nature, but to fully accept it. Your contradictions aren't issues that need to be fixed. They're powers that you can use. Your awareness causes pain and gives your life meaning. Your freedom scares and elevates you at the same time. Your flaws make you human, but they also limit you. The things that you've been trying to get rid of become the things that make life worth living. Thank you for joining us as we look into ideas that go against what we think we know about progress, happiness, and people. Take this wake-up call with you as you go back to the practical demands of daily life. The life you're trying so hard to perfect might already be perfect in every way, waiting not for improvement, but for acceptance of its worth as it is. The more you try to flee being human, the more deeply it claims you. It might be time to stop trying so hard to be different and start exploring what it means to be the contradiction that you already are. A living beauty, cruelty, wisdom, and folly that can come together in the most surprising ways. There is nothing wrong with the method. We have a system here, and even though it's not perfect, it's better that way than any plan could be. Living with balance in chaos and accepting your flaws may show Dostoevsky's most freeing insight. Your flaws and failures aren't problems you need to solve. They're necessary parts of living an authentic life. Transformation stories are all around you these days. These are stories of people who overcame all of their weaknesses, made every part of their lives better, and achieved their impossible dreams through sheer drive. Dostoevsky saw through these lies to a deeper truth. Trying to live a perfect life causes a very complex kind of pain. To be wise about being flawed, you must first realize that your flaws serve purposes you aren't aware of. In a society that expects you to be productive all the time, your tendency to put things off might be keeping you from getting burned out. If you can't keep up with some relationships, it might be because you're being wise and not keeping up with connections that drain your soul. From one point of view, what looks like failure is actually self-preservation. Not all flaws need to be fixed. Some just need to be understood. This new point of view changes the way you think about improving yourself. Before going to war with every flaw, you might want to think about what it's there to protect, what truth it holds, because they don't know what will happen in the future. The person who can't save money might find that enjoying the present is more sensible than waiting to feel good again. If someone sabotages success, it could be because they want to avoid demands that would break their spirit. Understanding the wisdom in your flaws doesn't make them okay, but it does show you why effort alone doesn't usually lead to lasting change. The characters in Dostoevsky's works show that big changes don't always happen through gradual growth, but through big failures. Raskolnikov doesn't slowly become more moral. He kills someone, goes through a lot of mental pain, and changes through breakdown instead of progress. It's likely that the most important changes in your life happened in similar ways. They weren't gradual changes, but sudden turns that broke old patterns and pushed you to see things in a new way. The knowledge includes how you see the flaws in other people. That tough coworker whose rigidity annoys you could be dealing with their worry in the only way they know how. The friend whose unreliability bothers you might be trying to stay away from promises they can't keep. When you realize that flaws often serve secret purposes, you can feel compassion for actions that would otherwise make you angry. You need to stop trying to fix everyone and start seeing the sense in their nonsense. This doesn't mean that we should celebrate disorder or give up on growth. Instead, it means going into change with a realistic view of what is possible and an appreciation for how complicated people are. Real change doesn't happen by getting rid of flaws. It happens by slowly changing how they show up in ways that are less harmful. The workaholic might not be able to get rid of their high standards, but they can learn to use them only sometimes. The person who constantly puts things off might not be able to stop, but they can set up methods that work with their habits instead of against them. In real life, accepting imperfection means building your life around who you are, not who you think you should be. If you're always late, add extra time to your plans instead of trying to be on time all the time. If you have trouble sticking to an exercise routine, find ways to move that feel more like fun than like work. If you have trouble with traditional relationship models, look for options that respect your true abilities instead of forcing yourself to fit into traditional molds. The urge to be perfect in the digital age makes this wisdom even more important. You see a lot of pictures of people with beautiful bodies, lives, accomplishments, and relationships. These pictures are carefully chosen to hide the messy truth. Comparing your inner experience to how other people show themselves on the outside causes a special kind of pain. The cure isn't to be perfect in every way, but to see that there is flaw in everything, even the most smooth surfaces. When it comes to work, accepting flaws could mean picking good enough over perfect, done over ideal, and progress over completion. The project that gets released with bugs is better for everyone than the beauty that stays on your computer. The business that changes in a messy way lasts longer than the one that tries to do everything perfectly. Realistic art that shows struggle connects with people more deeply than perfect technique ever could. In a spiritual sense, flaws are not problems, but doorways. There is a thought in many religions called the fortunate fall, that people's flaws make it possible for grace, growth, and ultimately redemption. You can't go beyond something you haven't fully lived in. Someone who has never failed doesn't have the humility that comes with being wise. People who have been to the bottom have knowledge that people who have stayed on top don't have. As this look at Dostoevsky's ideas comes to a close, take note of how each new idea builds on the ones that came before it. The paradox of effort shows why working harder doesn't always work. The underground man is awareness that has been pushed to its limits. Overthinking is a mistake that shows how limited thought is. When used in ways that aren't appropriate, logic turns into an enemy. Self-sabotage is a way for freedom to make itself heard. That freedom comes with the pain of being aware. Idealized structures like the Crystal Palace don't work because they ignore how people are. Instead of solving contradictions, we should welcome them. The art of not trying is its own thing. To find balance, you have to dance with chaos instead of trying to get rid of it. Last but not least, imperfection shows up not as a problem, but as the way that real life presents itself. These aren't vague intellectual thoughts. They're useful tips for getting through life. Every day, you have to decide whether to accept that you are human and have flaws, or to keep pushing yourself to meet impossible standards. Every encounter is a chance to connect through weakness, or keep your distance through the appearance of perfection. Every job has two choices: finish it well enough, or keep putting it off until it's perfect. Thank you for joining me on this trip through ideas that question the most common ideas in culture about success, happiness, and what people can do. Here's a wake-up call for you as you go back to your busy daily life. You are already enough. You are not perfect, finished, or growth-free, but you are basically enough as you are. The society of constant self-improvement makes money off of your feeling like you're not good enough. Businesses depend on you thinking that happiness is just around the corner after the next improvement. But Dostoevsky saw through these lies to a harsher, more honest truth. You are a flawed, contradictory, and sometimes failing person, and that's exactly what makes you capable of beauty, love, and meaning. Don't try so hard to be something other than yourself. Start looking into what you can do when you live in it fully. Maybe the life you're working so hard to get might not be as good as the one you have now, if you could only see it. Allowing you to be human in a world that wants you to be more than human is Dostoevsky's last gift. Take it. It's not as important to have a great life than to live an imperfect one right now. The knowledge of imperfection naturally leads to one of the most difficult problems in modern life: having too many options. Dostoevsky lived in a time when choices were growing, but you live in a time when options have grown so fast that people can't handle them all. Every choice, no matter how small or big, comes with a huge number of options. The freedom that people fought for in the past has turned into a strange kind of oppression, the tyranny of endless choice. Think about what you do in the morning. People from the past only drank one kind of coffee. If they drank coffee at all, it comes in a lot of different roast levels, sources, brewing methods, grind sizes, water temperatures, and extraction times. Each variable offers optimization, and the perfect cup can be found by making the right choice. What should only take minutes turns into hours of work as you look into it, compare it, and try it out. Getting coffee in the morning goes from being a simple pleasure to a difficult project management task. In every area of life, this increase of choice is true. No longer do career tracks follow set paths. Instead, they branch out into a huge number of specializations, hybrid roles, freelance arrangements, and opportunities to work from home. You don't just pick a job, you build your whole career identity from a huge number of different parts. There are many ways to get an education, such as traditional degrees, online certifications, boot camps, and self-directed learning tracks. Each promises an advantage, but none of them guarantees success, and they all take a lot of time and money. When it comes to relationships, there are probably the most options. Dating apps give you a huge pool of possible partners, and each page is a bunch of options that you need to look over. There are different types of relationships besides monogamy and polyamory, such as relationship anarchy, solo polyamory, and hierarchical versus egalitarian setups. Even in long-term relationships, you have to make decisions all the time about how to spend your time, how to set limits, how to balance growth and stability, and how to prioritize your own needs versus those of the pair. It gets harder because every decision has an opportunity cost. You can only pick one road, not thousands of others. You know everything you're missing, which people in the past didn't. Social media makes sure you're always seeing people living lives you didn't choose, going places you're not going, and having experiences you're not having. Fear of missing out, FOMO, follows you around all the time, making every choice something you might regret. As you try to find the best option for each choice, analysis paralysis sets in. You do a lot of study, make spreadsheets, ask for help, and play out different scenarios. But more knowledge doesn't always clear things up. Every study goes against the last one. Every expert gives different criteria, and new factors keep coming up. Every time someone tries to find the right choice, it gets farther away. As time goes on, chances fade, and the stress of making a choice outweighs any good that the right choice might bring. A certain kind of modern sadness is caused by the burden of choice. This is known as the paradox of choice by psychologists. Having more choices makes people less satisfied. You got one style of jeans when you were able to. Now that there are walls of different cuts, washes, names, and prices, you either leave empty-handed or buy something even though you know there were better choices. Because you're so aware of all the other options that weren't chosen, the road you chose feels less satisfying. When it comes to life's big choices, this dynamic can be crippling. When you can work from anywhere, it's hard to choose where to live. When you think about all the pros, cons, and other options, deciding whether to have children can be very difficult. Career pivots are always tempting when you see other people changing areas and doing well. The stable life that older generations took for granted now requires choices at every turn, with each choice point being a possible problem. You get decision fatigue, which means your mind is worn out from having to make choices all the time. After making hundreds of small decisions, you don't have the energy to make big decisions by evening. Scrolling instead of reading, ordering takeout instead of cooking, and watching whatever Netflix offers are all things you do without giving them much thought. The abundance of pointless options drains the ability to make important ones. Technology says it will help, but it often makes things harder. It should be easier to choose with recommendation algorithms, but you spend hours handling your preferences, curating your feeds, and making your optimization tools work better. There are a lot of apps that help you make decisions, and each one makes you choose which one to use. The tools that are supposed to make choices easier end up adding more choices that need to be managed. This paradox is very clear in the workplace. You can choose where to sit in an open office plan, which can make you worry every day about the best way to sit. When you have flexible work hours, you decide when to work every day, which takes away the ease of having a set plan. When you can take as many vacations as you want, you worry about how much time you will have. Benefits packages have so many choices that you need experts to help you find your way around them. The freedom we seek turns into a jail. Even consumption, which is meant to be fun, turns into a problem. You read reviews, look at prices on different platforms, and do a lot of study before making a purchase. When efficiency pressure builds up, the joy of acquisition fades. Even when you make a good buy, you may still feel bad about it later, because you know you could have spent weeks more researching. It turns into a part-time job just to buy things you need. The number of social options grows very quickly. It's not enough to just follow established patterns when deciding which events to attend, which offers to accept, and which relationships to put first. You are in charge of several social media accounts, and on each one you have to decide what to post, who to follow, and how to interact with others. When you use digital communication, you have to be present all the time and decide whether and how to respond at any time. Dostoevsky's ideas about awareness and overthinking are still useful, as shown by the burden of choice. Every choice is a chance for the critical mind to torture itself with all the possible outcomes. You don't just make a choice, you think about it, question your criteria, and analyze the process of making the choice. When consciousness faces an infinite number of choices, instinctive selection can't work as simply and directly as it does in animals. Realizing the weight of your choices won't take away your choices, but it might change how you interact with them. Good enough picking or satisficing instead of maximizing might be something you like. You could make up random limits to narrow down the options. You might realize that no choice guarantees the best results, and find peace in that. The goal changes from making the best choices to making choices that you can live with, knowing that there will be times when you'll wish you had done something differently. In Things of the Heart, where Dostoevsky saw a basic truth, love cannot be controlled, logically explained, or improved without losing its very essence. The burden of infinite choice is at its most poignant. These days, people try to use organized thinking in every part of their lives, even when they're dating. Relationship coaches say they can help you find love that lasts. Dating apps use algorithms to make you less interested in people, and science studies say they have figured out the chemistry of attachment. But the more you try to steer love's path, the more likely it is that it will slip away. Love follows its own rules, or more accurately, its own lack of rules. It's not possible to convince someone to love you through logic. You can't use smart behavior to make people like you. Scheduled date nights and other relationship care rules won't keep the flame alive. These attempts to organize love show that people have a deep-seated misunderstanding of what love is. Love is like a wild animal. If you go up to it, it will run away. But if you sit still, it might come up to you. Think about how the control paradox is made worse by modern dating society. You make perfect profiles by choosing pictures that show off your best features and writing bios that are both funny and serious. You plan when to answer texts, figuring out the best time to show interest without seeming desperate. You know when to text, what to say, and how to make things worse. It turns into a show of control, with each person trying to shape how the other sees them while hiding how they really feel. This performative part kills the spontaneity that makes real connection possible. Real love often starts in casual situations, like a real laugh, an unexpected openness, or a shared look of understanding. You can't make these times happen or plan them ahead of time. They happen when personalities briefly take off their masks and interact in a mysterious way. It gets more fake the more you try to make these moments happen on purpose. Dostoevsky's characters show over and over that love is hard to control logically. Why do they fall in love with the wrong people at the wrong times? The very fact that they want to keep relationships together breaks them down. They learn that love's power lies in its ability to ruin all of their carefully thought out plans, to make senseless decisions, and to demand sacrifices that no cost-benefit analysis would support. Trying to make sense of love leads to certain kinds of modern pain. You look at how relationships work and find bond styles, love languages, and compatibility scores. Even though these frameworks give us some ideas, using them as full answers turns love into a simple matter of how things work. When you meet someone who is truly different from you, you lose the ability to be surprised and changed. Your partner stops being a person to get to know and starts being a set of patterns to control. Control models can be hard for long-term relationships in their own way. You set goals for your relationships, keep track of your growth, and improve the ways you talk to people. Marriage stops being a mystery and starts being a job to be managed. In private places, business terms like investment, returns, and efficiency start to be used. You talk about working on the relationship as if it were a broken machine instead of a live thing with its own seasons and rhythms. Around important times in a relationship, the need to rule grows stronger. You plan the perfect proposals, the perfect weddings, and the best times for kids to be born. Each milestone turns into a project that needs to be managed instead of something that naturally happens as the relationship grows. The stress of having to do these transitions correctly often takes away from how important they really are. You take charge of your own love story instead of just being a part of it. Trying to rationally control something hurts sexual closeness more than anything else. With so many technique guides, performance tips, and optimization strategies out there, physical connection has become another area where success anxiety can show up. Comparing your personal life to statistical norms and professional advice, you keep an eye on how often, how long, and what kinds of things happen. The awareness that wants to improve closeness ends up getting in the way of its true expression. Technology makes love's power paradox even more complicated. You keep an eye on your partners on social media by following their posts and looking at their digital actions for signs of interest or betrayal. Sharing locations, getting read receipts, and seeing activity state open up a world of new ways to spy on people. The tools that are supposed to help people connect end up being used to control people and make them suspicious instead of trusting. It's impossible to control love all the way to its end. It's not possible to think your way out of being hurt or to end a relationship. The heart has its own schedule and doesn't care about logical reasons for why you should be over someone. Trying to control the grieving process with stages, dates, and recovery plans often makes the pain last longer. Giving up power and letting love's natural cycles do its work is what heals. It's hard to control and make sense of self-love. You are told to love yourself first and given ways to boost your confidence and words to say to yourself over and over. Real self-acceptance, on the other hand, often comes not from following these steps, but from failing, breaking down, or having a moment when you lose control and realize you're still alive. When you keep trying, you keep yourself from accepting yourself. Dostoevsky knew that the fact that love is hard to control is what makes it strong. Love changes precisely because it can't be controlled, expected, or kept in logical boxes. It gets past barriers, changes plans, and opens up options that rational thinking could never think of. Someone who has never been hurt by love has never really loved. This insight doesn't say that you should give in to your passions without any limits or knowledge. Instead, it recommends going into love with what you might call prepared openness, keeping enough structure to be present while still being open enough for real encounter. You make things possible for love to grow without trying to push it to. You take care of the yard without trying to force flowers to bloom at certain times. Chaos is not the answer to controlling love. The answer is faith. Trust in your ability to deal with uncertainty. Trust in love's intelligence, and trust that meaning comes from lived experience rather than planned outcomes. In a world where the right apps, techniques, and strategies can give you power, this trust seems risky. Dostoevsky on the other hand, knew that real love always comes with danger and going beyond what can be controlled to what can only be experienced. Love's refusal to be controlled shows a darker side of human nature, the search for an idealized double that kills the person who is after it. You make up a picture of the person you think you should be, more successful, confident, controlled, and attractive. And this made-up self turns into a tyrant who always wants to be praised. Dostoevsky wrote the most direct about this idea in The Double, in which a man meets his doppelganger, who is everything he wants to be, but this perfect version of himself destroys his life over and over again. The double comes from consciousness's unique ability to look at itself and compare things. Animals have no choice but to live as themselves. You're always aware of the difference between what you are and what you could be. This gap creates creative tension that helps things grow, but when it gets too big, it swallows up real reality. The ideal self you create from societal standards, personal goals, and comparisons ends up being more real to you than the real you. Social media makes this doubling even stronger than ever before. You create an online persona by choosing only the times that fit with how you see yourself in your ideal world. This digital double gets likes, fans, and approval that your real self never quite gets. With each post, the gap between your messy inner life and your clean public image gets bigger. You start to act for your own double, trying to live up to the online version of your life. The doubles that come up at work are especially harmful. When you make a LinkedIn page, you talk about who you want to be instead of who you are. When people go to networking events, they act like their best professional selves. The imposter syndrome outbreak shows how everyone feels when they compare their real life to everyone else's fake versions of it. You feel fake, not because you're lying to other people, but because you know there is a gap between what you do and what you really are. Looking for the perfect double makes you hate yourself in a certain way. Every success feels empty because you know how hard it was, how much stress you went through, and how different the outward success is from the internal experience. You can't enjoy your successes because they'll never compare to how effortlessly great your double would be. If you were really who you say you are, it wouldn't have been so hard. Success becomes proof of failure. This is why people who are very successful often say they feel the most fake when they are at their best. The external confirmation proves that their double exists while showing them how inadequate they are. During the acceptance speech, the Oscar winner thinks about how scared they are. The newly promoted executive can't stop thinking about how confused they are in meetings. When you look at your outside success, the gap between it and your ideal self, who would handle everything with grace, becomes bigger. In relationships, the double shows up as the person you act like to get love. You show limited versions of yourself, hiding the parts that could make you look like a bad person. But keeping up this level of effort wears you out. Even though you have the connection, you can't enjoy it because you know it's based on lies. Even when you're close to someone, the fear that they love your double instead of your real self keeps you apart. People who are supposed to help you feel less lonely end up making you feel more lonely. The double's tyranny can be seen in the culture of exercise. You're not after health, but an image, the perfect body you see in shots that are carefully lit and have perfect angles. You punish yourself with strict diets and punishing habits because your real body isn't as perfect as you think it is. Even reaching physical goals doesn't bring peace because the double changes the target right away. Someone younger, fitter, or more dedicated is always around to make you feel bad about yourself. You should be a wise, peaceful, and caring person, but your spiritual double might be the most harmful. You try to reach a state of awareness that is always out of reach by going to workshops, reading books, and meditating. Trying to become spiritual makes you judge other people's unconsciousness. Be frustrated with your own growth and act wise when you don't feel wise. The pressure to look spiritually grown by the double stops real spiritual growth. Dostoevsky's understanding shows that when you try to become the double, it gets stronger. You can see how far away something is, the more you try to close the gap. Inadequacy is shown by effort. Moving forward shows you how far you still need to go. The double moves away at the exact speed that you're chasing it, keeping the gap that makes its presence and your lack of sufficiency possible. When the double makes you believe that you are the fake one, it has won. What you're going through now feels different from the idealized picture of who you are. You say sorry for being yourself and promise to become the double one day. You spend your whole life waiting to become the person you should be, instead of living as the person you are. Destruction doesn't come from outside sources. It comes from being tired of keeping the split together. You can't keep up the show forever. The difference between what is real and what is ideal creates more and more strain until something breaks. This could show up as stress, a breakdown, an addiction, or sudden big changes in life that people from the outside can't understand. From the inside, you're not ruining your life. You're giving up on the impossible goal of becoming your double. Giving up on all your goals and settling for average is not the answer. Instead, it means seeing the double as a building that can help you find your way, but is dangerous when used as an identity. You might set goals, even though you don't think they will help you reach them. You could work on getting better while accepting that you aren't good enough right now. You might play important parts without realizing their acts. When seen as a tool instead of truth, the double loses its ability to hurt. There are people who find freedom by failing so badly that they can't keep doing the double. The public breakdown, job collapse, or relationship explosion that seems terrible actually frees you by closing the gap between what you say you can do and what you can actually do. When everyone has seen you at your worst, there is no need to keep up a false picture. You're only left with being yourself, and sometimes that's enough. The search for an ideal double goes straight to Raskolnikov's story in Crime and Punishment, which is one of Dostoevsky's most powerful examples of planned self-destruction. You meet a young man who thinks he can go beyond normal morality by using his intelligence and willpower to make up a complicated philosophical reason for killing someone. His spectacular failure shows that people who try to get above human nature by breaking the rules on purpose end up getting the punishment they want to escape. Raskolnikov starts out as a smart but poor student in St. Petersburg who is obsessed with an idea that separates people into two groups. Normal people must follow moral rules, which keep society stable for everyone. Extraordinary people, like Napoleon and other world changers, can break these rules when they are working toward better goals. He tells himself that he is in the second group, and that to prove it, he has to do something that goes against all moral rules. Within its own framework, the reasoning seems perfect. He carefully chooses his victim, an old pawn shop owner who takes advantage of poor people and does nothing good for society. Her death might help others if her wealth is shared out. He carefully plans, thinking about everything, coming up with excuses, and figuring out when things will happen. This won't be an emotional crime. It will be an intellectual experiment, a logical break with old moral rules. You can see him use logic to convince himself to do it. If extraordinary people exist, they must show what kind of people they are by doing extraordinary things. If moral rules are just made up by society, then a wise person can see through them. It is not only okay to get rid of one parasitic person in order to help many other people, if the greater good justifies the smaller evils. It is clear that each part of the case follows from the last, creating a structure of ideas that supports murder. The fact that he planned his crime makes the effects of it even worse. A crime of love could be understood, forgiven, and accepted as part of being human. Raskolnikov's cold philosophical murder, on the other hand, makes him totally alone. He can't confess, because that would mean he failed. He can't forget what he did, because he planned it so well. He can't say that he was temporarily crazy, because he did it while fully aware, and after careful planning. The punishment starts right away, and it doesn't come from outside sources. This is how his body reacts: fever, delirium, and physical failure. His mind is broken, going back and forth between big reasons why he did what he did and crushing guilt. He starts to feel paranoid and sees accusations in every look and hears criticism in normal talks. The ideal person who could go beyond morals runs into the real person who can't get away from his or her nature. Raskolnikov's pain shows you how planned evil can cause its own kind of pain. One way for someone who hurts others without thinking could be to see how weak they are. But Raskolnikov hurt on purpose, methodically and mentally. He can't use ignorance or feeling as an excuse. Not only does his crime call into question his actions, but it also calls into question his whole worldview, the complex philosophical system he built to defend going beyond human limits. He feels even more alone because he can't really connect with other people while keeping such a big secret. Every conversation is a show, and every connection is a lie. People who care about him push him away because their love makes him feel bad about who he's become. The great man he thought he was would not feel guilty, need comfort, or look for forgiveness. His pain shows how normal he is, which makes him feel even worse about his guilt. Through Raskolnikov, Dostoevsky shows how trying to rise above people by purposely breaking the rules brings you down to the level of normal human experience. The simple person whose morals they follow without question has a better life than the scientist who uses logic to become bad. The intellectual pride that led to the crime becomes the jail that keeps people from getting away from its effects. The psychological punishment is worse than any punishment that is real. Before he did what he did, Raskolnikov was poor in material terms, but free in his mind. After that, even times of physical pleasure don't ease the mental pain. He failed to overcome himself. Instead of rising above human nature, he fell below it, becoming less human while trying to become more. Redemption doesn't come from solving problems, but from tearing down the whole system that made the act possible. Raskolnikov needs to give up her guilt over one act as well as the way she thought about everything that made it possible. He can't think his way out of what he thought his way into. He can't reason this away. Redemption needs more than just reasoning. It needs real human connection, acceptance of limitations, and acceptance of the ordinary humanity he was trying to escape. Sonya's love, a prostitute who stays spiritually pure despite her situation, sets things in motion. Raskolnikov's theory didn't believe that suffering and goodness could exist together, that being degraded doesn't take away a person's worth, and that redemption comes through acceptance rather than transcendence. Her faith isn't something she thinks about, but something she lives and feels. Through Raskolnikov's trip, you can see why well-thought-out attempts at greatness so often end in disaster. You are cut off from human feelings, morals, and the connections that give life value by the math that you have to do. The plan to become special through conscious effort will keep you stuck in the way of thinking that stops real change. The trend includes not only crimes, but also any attempt to be better by breaking human rules over and over again. People in business who ignore morals to make money, politicians who think that good goals support bad methods, and artists who purposely shock to show how smart they are, all follow Raskolnikov's path, but in different ways. They come up with complicated reasons to break normal morals, only to find that the sentence is built into the crime itself. Raskolnikov's story is a warning against intellectual pride that thinks it can change people's nature by sheer force of will. Because thinking rests on values you can't think your way past good and evil. If you try to judge people from the outside, you will fall below them. Real transformation doesn't come from trying to overcome yourself, but from accepting your humanity, flaws, and all. Understanding Raskolnikov's journey through planned wrongdoing and sure failure shows how ridiculous life really is. There are no clear answers, absolute meanings, or certain purposes in this world, but you have to live as if your choices do matter. Existentialism is the idea that existence comes before essence, and that you have to make meaning in a world that doesn't give you any. Dostoevsky thought about this idea a long time ago. His work is not a way to get away from this nonsense. It is a way to live in it. The absurd shows up in the space between our need for meaning and the silence of the world. You question why you are here, what you should do, and how you should live. The universe doesn't care about what you say. Stars die and burn without a reason. Atoms join and split up based on physical rules that have nothing to do with right or wrong. But you can't stop looking for meaning. You can't stop feeling like the choices you make matter, and you can't stop living as if your life has meaning. The absurd situation is caused by this difference between how people are and how indifferent the universe is. Dostoevsky's characters deal with this nonsense in the most extreme ways. It's best shown in Ivan Karamazov's revolt against a god who lets innocent people suffer. He has a good understanding of how suffering might serve a better purpose, but he won't agree to any plan that needs kids to cry. His point of view makes no sense from a rational or an existential point of view. He can't accept the world as it is, but he has to live in it anyway. Every day you have to deal with similar, if less striking, problems. In the grand scheme of things, you know that your life is just a brief flash in a very big world. Still, you get up every day and go about your life as if it were very important. You start relationships, knowing they'll end, work toward goals, knowing you'll die, and make meaning, knowing it's something you make up instead of finding. It's not the actions themselves that are silly. It's the mind that knows they're wrong, but can't stop doing them. The absurd is more common in today's world, where traditional forms of meaning are becoming less important. In the past, people could rely on religious certainty, national traditions, or clear social roles. It turns out that all of these structures were made by people and are not required in the world you live in. But the need for meaning that these organizations met is still there. You have to find meaning without the supports that were there before. There are several different responses to this condition. Nihilism says that nothing is important if it doesn't have any value on its own. But Dostoevsky saw that nihilism doesn't explain how people can have meaning in their lives, even if that meaning can't be explained logically. You can't just decide that something doesn't matter when everything inside you says it does. Nihilism is another form of bad faith because it denies parts of experience that won't go away. Another reaction is to escape by getting distracted. You get caught up in work, fun, buying things, or anything else to escape facing the absurd directly. These kinds of escapes are easy to find in modern life. Still, there are times when things are quiet and the big questions come back up. The strategy of distraction needs higher and higher doses, which is a tiring escape from thoughts that move at the speed of awareness. Dostoevsky suggests a different way to deal with things, accepting the absurd while living fully in it. That doesn't mean celebrating having no meaning or giving up all your beliefs. Instead, it means keeping your meanings lightly, pursuing purposes even though you know they're chosen rather than found, loving even though you'll die, and making things even though they won't matter. The ridiculous is no longer something that gets in the way of real life. It is life itself. This acceptance changes the way you think about life. You don't look to the universe to confirm your choices. Instead, you know that the choices themselves make whatever meaning there is. You stop waiting for the universe to show you your mission and start making them every moment. When there is no final meaning, there is freedom to make up temporary meanings that serve life rather than abstract ideas. Surprisingly, the ridiculous also shows unity. Every person has the same basic problem. They were born without instructions and have to make sense of the world around them. They are aware of death, but need to live. This common situation can bring people together instead of making them feel alone. Everyday life is like a boat where everyone is making it up as they go along. The fact that the condition is universal makes a link to live with the absurd. You need what Dostoevsky might have called a leap of faith, but it doesn't have to be religious faith. You act like the decisions you make are important, even though you know you can't show they are. You care about people who will die, make things that will be forgotten, and work toward goals that don't mean anything in the end. The hope comes from the promise to keep going, even though there are no guarantees. This doesn't make sense, and is outside the realm of reasoning. The real-world effects change how people live their lives. You stop looking for perfect reasons to do what you're doing, and just do it. The search for your true calling ends, and you focus on what's in front of you. You let go of the need for cosmic meaning and find enough meaning in things that affect people. You decide to accept that life is basically silly, and you find that this decision somehow makes it possible to live. Dostoevsky was very good at writing about people who show these tensions instead of solving them. They don't get rid of the ridiculous. Instead, they learn to dance with it. They suffer and rejoice, have faith and doubt, build and destroy. But they know that none of it makes sense in the end. Their energy doesn't come from figuring out life's puzzles, but from being fully involved even though they don't know how to solve them. When this journey is over, you won't have answers, but you will have a way to live the questions. Dostoevsky doesn't give us a method, rules, or ultimate truth. Instead, he paints images of people who are struggling with the basic contradictions of life. You can see your own problems in the ones they're going through. By seeing how badly they failed, you can see that trying to make life perfect is impossible. By sticking with it through everything, they give you freedom to do the same. Thank you for joining me on this philosophical trip through uncharted territory, looking at ideas that contradict themselves, and following a thinker who believed that literature could tell the truth more than logic. This is your last wake-up call. You're already living a crazy life. Being a meaning-seeking being in a meaningless world is a fundamental contradiction that can't be solved by success, optimization, or achievement. That being said, this is not a reason to give up. It is the essence of freedom. It's possible for anything to happen when nothing is certain. You can choose your own road when there aren't any right ones. When life doesn't make sense in the end, you can stop putting in so much effort to figure it out and just live it. You miss being alive more when you try to solve the problem of life. Stop trying so hard to figure out what life is all about and start making life out of what doesn't make sense. Dostoevsky's last paradox is that accepting how silly life is makes it not only bearable, but also beautiful. You might be looking for freedom in the meaninglessness you've been trying to get away from.